चलिए स्टार्ट करते हैं अपनी सीरीज का अगला टॉपिक जो आज है एक्सट्रीमिज्म इन छत्तीसगढ़। छत्तीसगढ़ में ऐसा क्या हुआ विच बिकेम अ प्रॉब्लम रिगार्डिंग सिक्योरिटी ऑफ स्टेट। सो छत्तीसगढ़ पहले जो था वो मध्य प्रदेश का पार्ट था। अराउंड 1 नवंबर 2000 में इसको अलग करके एक नया स्टेट 26 स्टेट घोषित किया गया। अच्छा, ये जो है वर्स्ट लेफ्ट विंग अफेक्टेड एक्सट्रीमिज्म से अफेक्टेड एरिया है। अराउंड 2021 में 255 वायलेंट इंसिडेंट हुए थे, 101 लोग मरे थे एंड 51% ऑफ ऑल लेफ्ट विंग एक्सट्रीमिस्ट वायलेंट इंसिडेंट। 2022 में द नंबर ऑफ वायलेंट इंसिडेंट इंक्रीज्ड टू 279 which corresponded to 56 people dead. So in Chhattisgarh, 14 districts are Maoist affected, including 7 are severely affected. Bastar division is spread around 39,117 square kilometers with the population of 15 lakh is considered as Maoist affected area. As police estimates, about 4,500 Maoist cadre comprising of both political and military wing lives in the jungle of Bastar. ये आपका छत्तीसगढ़ का मैप है। जैसे कि आप ऊपर देख पा रहे हैं, छत्तीसगढ़ का बॉर्डर यूपी से भी लगता है, झारखंड से भी लगता है, उड़ीसा से, आंध्र प्रदेश से, तेलंगाना से एंड मध्य प्रदेश से। छत्तीसगढ़ में अगर कोई इंसिडेंट होता है, ये एरिया अफेक्टेड होता है, सो ऑटोमेटिकली ये साइड्स एरिया भी अफेक्ट होंगे। एंड छत्तीसगढ़ इज फॉर like still the nature jungle and all, it is there, and because of that it gets a good hideout for the extremist। वर्ड्स कहाँ पे क्या यूज करने हैं वो याद रखिएगा। मिलिटेंट्स इन पंजाब, एक्सट्रीमिस्ट ऑफ छत्तीसगढ़, ऐसे, ठीक है। So Chhattisgarh has its first brush of left-wing extremism in 1980s when the cadres of PWG from the neighboring like Telangana and Andhra Pradesh started entering into Bastar. The objective was to spread Karimnagar Adilabad revolutionary movement to one of the most backward region in India. Later, as anti-PWG operations were intensified by Andhra government, more and more PWG cadre escaping the government crackdown started spilling in Dandkaranya region, jungle region of Chhattisgarh. Then significantly, PWG has taken a conscious decision during the time to build the base area where geographical conditions like mountain, hills, forest are a favorable terrain. Other more favorable for the conducting guerrilla warfare. According to the leadership has identified Dandkaranya area comprising of Bastar, Narayanpur, Bijapur, Dantewada and Kanker district of Chhattisgarh as an ideal region to establish a base area, launched their guerrilla movement. Now, because of this region has a heavily forested terrain, it is predominantly inhabited by the tribal people, especially the Gonds. Now, beside a favorable geographical condition, the Dandakaranya region also have socio-economic features which favored communists to start activities. For example, Abujmand in Dandakaranya was beyond the administration reach of the state till recently. People of the region have subsistence means of livelihood as they practice shifting agriculture, झूम culture, आसाम में हम लोगों ने पढ़ा था। Hunt and collect only the forest produce. As a result, people of the region live in extreme poverty and do not have access to the basic amenities such as potable water, sanitation, health, education, transportation, means of livelihood, etc. So the matter was the economic policies of Indian government focusing on setting up big extractive industries as well as constructions of big dam alienated the tribal also from the land. The tribal was also exploited by the moneylenders, shortchanged by the contractors, and the maltreated by the petty officials and policemen. Describing the dire plight of the tribal Chhattisgarh, the Bhuria Commission क्या कहती है? The government of India established Bankaranyan Development Authority covering the tribal area of Odisha and present Chhattisgarh state for the rehabilitation of East Pakistan Bangladesh refugees who were given lands as well as means of livelihood for the relief and rehabilitation. On the other hand, tribal did not receive a due attention, which also contributed as a cause of tribal discontent. The linking up of Raipur and Jagdalpur facilitated the entry of non-tribal into Bastar. Between 1992 and 96, the nexus of officials and timber merchants conspired to strip Bastar of a significant amount of timber. The forest department started mono-tree cultivation, depriving the tribal of the fuel, fodder, and grass requirement. This, however, was stopped on the account of the protest by the environmentalist exploitation of the tribal women at the hand of non-tribal in developing urban centers led to the resentment among the tribal, although some steps were taken. As mentioned, socio-economic landscape provided the PWG who had by 80s discarded the annihilation line found conducive opportunity to harness the collective grievances of the tribal population and to consolidate the organizationally in the region. Initially, what happened? PWG cadre operating in a small armed squad consisting of 5 members each took particular cases in Bastar such as non-payment of minimum wages, teachers, doctors, absenteeism, demands of bribe by the policemen, forest guards, attack on their cultural identity through conversions as a part of their strategy to endear them, to attract them to the tribal people. The PWG cadre punished the corrupt official, made the Hindu leaves contractor, increased the wages, disciplined teachers, doctors, fought for the tribal rights for forest produce, and even held the health and education programs. Such action elicited awe, respect from the tribals, and they gradually gravitated towards the Maoist. Then from 1980s onwards, Maoists started consolidating their struggle by organizing tribal and conducting sporadic violent incidents mostly aimed at the government. For instance, during the severe drought of 87 and 88, the Maoists organized the tribal and raided the house of landlords, government godowns, looted for food grains, clothes, and vessels. Beginning Maoists started violently opposing election. During 91 Lok Sabha election, they killed 8 members of polling party, including 6 policemen by triggered landmine blast. 93 10 CRPF personnel were killed when they were returning from election duties. In 90s, the Maoists formed two mass organizations, DAKMS and Krantikari Mahila Adivasi Sangathan. DAKMS made several demands like better wages, high rates of collections of minor forest produce, thus regularizing cultivation of forest land, right of cattle to continue grazing in the forest, ending all harassment by the forest officials, police arbitrary fines collected by them. These demands were aimed at providing the tribal people control over their lands and the forest resources. While the Krantikari Mahila Adivasi Sangathan on its part focused on issues affecting women, campaigned against social evil like forced marriage, abduction, bigamy, domestic violence, consumption of liquor. These two front organizations thus acted as a cover for extension of Maoist guerrilla activities in Dankaranya region. The Maoists also formed People's Committee, which was followed by the formation of Revolutionary People Committee, also known as Janatana Sarkar, People's Government, in the region. The main objective of the committee was to carry out administration and judicial function, providing amenities, health, education, livelihood, developmental activities, and dispensing of justice. A parallel government they have created. The aim was to organize the villages through social, economical, and cultural transformation in order to create a base area for militia and raiding the guerrilla squad. According to the Maoist document, each committee was formed with a population of 500 to 3,500 persons. The committee was representative of mass organization, people who have active in protecting and defending the guerrilla zone. It stated out 4,000 to 5,000 villages in the area. Nearly half of the villages had people's committee. By 97-98, most of the Dankaranya region under the Maoist influence had RPGs, RPCs. RPCs were formed in 500 villages, and Dankaranya had influence over 2,000 villages. Commenting on the establishment, the senior Maoist leader said, "Now we are forming RPCs which are geographically conducive for guerrilla warfare. RPC is a basic form of people rule. Where there is a basic people rule in the village, then it becomes very difficult for any arm of the official machinery to function properly there. This is because when two forces are working at once, only one force can remain. This could either be ours or enemy." The creation of RPC or Jantana Sarkar by overthrowing the authority of the government and establishing the political authority of the Maoist by coercion signified the first step towards creating a base area. According to the Maoist literature, the base area thus created should be self-sufficient economy to sustain the party and people war, which is essential to bring a new democratic revolution. For this purpose, Maoists who regarded the economic activities of tribals as primitive started carrying out developmental work to increase productivity in their area of influence. In fact, Maoist literature boasts that they have been engaged in considerable developmental activities, especially in the field of agricultural and livelihood improvement. According to the literature, 81 tanks were built in Dantewada district, 4 lakh fish seedling distributed to Konta squad, 16,200 saplings distributed, diesel pump introduced in 9 villages, cooperative paddy banks were set up, agricultural cooperatives created into 20 villages, amongst other things. The Maoist had, however, implemented much of these developmental work, such as building irrigation bunds, canals through forced labors from the tribals, which they euphemistically referred as Shramdan. The Maoist also raided rich landlords, confiscated their grains and land. The confiscated grains and lands, however, were not entirely redistributed to the tribals, but half of them were kept for sustaining themselves and their army. At the height of the conflict, Maoist had reported confiscated around 1,546 acres of land from the landlords, while they distributed 743 acres of land. The rest were kept to the collective need of the village. It is, however, not clarified what collective need meant and how much of the land and the produce is kept away from sustaining the people's army. At the same time, Maoist has continued to oppose developmental activities that were launched by the government to improve the condition of the tribals. Maoist has violently prevented the implementation of developmental work such as railways, roads, power, telecom in the area of influence, so the tribal people that governance structure at the ground are ineffective. Now, how it got started. Formation of PLGA in 2000 provided much required teeth to the Maoist movement in the region. It was stated that Maoist has organized several military camps in their stronghold in the terrains to train the armed cadre. They were using sophisticated weapons like AK-47 rifle, SLR. The Maoist has also developed expertise in fabrication and use of IDs, improvised explosive devices. And then thereafter, death and incidents increased. In 2000, the state recorded 79 incidents, 48 deaths, which rose to 304 and 55 deaths in 2002. The Maoist movement in India got major fillip in October 2004 when PWG and MCCI merged to form a political party, that is CPI Maoist. PLGA became its army with the merger of two units brought the force to proclivity of Maoist towards the mindless violence. which was demonstrated in increased attacks on policemen, landlords, so-called collaborators, hapless villagers, tribals, as well as the government buildings, infrastructure, and jail. The number of violent incidents resulted killings accordingly increased in ensuing years. In 2004, Chhattisgarh recorded 352 violent incidents in which 83 persons were killed, which rose to 380 incidents and 165 deaths in 2005. One of the reasons of increase in the least level of violence in 2005 was the action of anti-Naxalite force called Salva Judum Purification Hunt against the Maoist cadres and counter attacks by the Maoist. This trend increased the violence observed till 2011 when Supreme Court declared Salva Judam as illegal. The increased level of violence prompted the Prime Minister Manmohan Singh in 2006 to declare the left wing extremism or Maoism as single biggest internal security challenge. He suggested to the Chief Minister of the Maoist hit states to consider undertaking of joint operations and setting up joint unified commands. He further suggested that police action against the Maoist cadres should be followed by generous surrender and rehabilitation policies. While a few chief ministers undertook some of the measures to counter the Maoist movement, majority of them either did not take any action or took half-hearted measures. Consequently, violence level started increasing, especially in Chhattisgarh, which became the epicenter of Maoist violence in the country. By 2008, Maoist-related violence escalated 620 incident with 242 deaths, peaked in 2010, 625 incident with 343 deaths, which was recorded in the state. In one of the incidents, 6 April 2010, 75 CRPF personnel were killed by Maoists in Tadmetla forest in Dantewada district. Now, Maoist leader termed the violence as war of self-defense or a counter-violence in response of brutal and violent repression campaign aimed at suppression of political movement of people for exploitation of members. The Maoist also rejected the appeal then Union Home Minister P. Chidambaram to abjure violence and come for a peace talk, saying that they would never lay down arms. Ganapathy, in an interview in 2010, led condition of Maoists to participate in peace talks. The conditions were all-out war has to be withdrawn, ban on party and mass organization has to be lifted, illegal detentions and tortures of the comrades has to be stopped, they should be immediately released. He further stated that if these demands were met, then the leaders who were released from the prisons will lead and represent the party in the talks. Since Maoists did not stop violence, the Union government could not initiate the peace talks with them. Maoists' refusal to renounce the violence and participate in peace talks forced the Union government, in cooperation with the state government, to redouble its effort to counter the Maoist problem. Because of the renewed efforts, the Maoists started losing the grounds. As a result, violence level in Chhattisgarh started declining from 2012 onwards, when 465 violent incident and 204 deaths were reported, to 328 incident and 112 killed in 2014. One of the reasons for the decline of Maoist related incident also attributed by disbanding of Salva Judum, which was responsible for increased attack and counter-attacks in the state. This declining trend in Maoist violence, however, did not mean Maoists were weakened. In fact, cadre base of PLG has increased from 8 companies to 13 platoons in 2008 to 12 companies and more than 25 platoons in 2013. Jiram Ghati attack on May 2013, in 29 persons, including senior Congress leader, were killed by the Maoists, is the example that Maoists were capable of launching successful and spectacular attacks, especially in their strongholds. Now, this fact is further corroborated by statistics on the numbers of violent incidents, which started rising from 2015 onwards. In 2015, the state reported 466 violent incidents, in which 101 persons were killed, and figures related to the violence incident in the state 18, 19, 20 was around 392 persons, 263 and 315 respectively. The total numbers of casualties of incidents were 341. As per the National Crime Record Bureau, a total 533 cases against Maoists were registered in 8 states in 2010. Chhattisgarh accounted for 296 of these cases, almost half of these cases. The statistics further show that the total of 74 murders committed by the Maoist in 2020, 62 were reported in Chhattisgarh. Similarly, out of 41 registered cases of loot by Maoist, 39 reported in the state. Chhattisgarh also topped the list of 139 cases of attempt of murder by the Maoist out of 172 cases. Two-thirds belongs to them. Further, the year 2021 also saw the number of violent incidents, the most violent being which occurred in 3rd April 2021 in Jonagada village, Sukama district. In this incident, 21 security personnel were killed and 31 was injured. It was reported that the security forces came under attack when they were returning after search of top Maoist leader Midvi Hidimba. It is also reported that Maoist cadres and Jen militia used light machine guns under the barrel grenade launchers during the attack. Similarly, violence continued in 2022-23. In one of the biggest attacks in the Maoist in 2 years, 10 personnel of District Reserve Guards, including 5 Commerce Maoists, were killed in an IED blast triggered by the Maoist in Aranpura area, Dantewala district, 27th April 2023. The attacks happened during TCCO Tactical Counter-Offensive Campaign period when Maoists launched an armed attacks in the month of March to June when the forest was devoid of any green cover. Targets are in plain sight and well-trained cadres. Now, what was the state government response? Ministry of Home Affairs annual report in 2006 and 7 states that keeping in the view of Naxalism is not merely a law and order. The policy of the government is to address the menace simultaneously on the political, security, development, and public perceptions management front in the holistic manner. Despite implementing a comprehensive strategies towards tackling the Maoist problem, Chhattisgarh continues to experience large-scale violence. In such a scenario, it is instructive to discuss the efforts of Chhattisgarh government, highlighting the shortcomings of the efforts of successive state leadership in tackling the Maoist response. What was the security response? Even though Union government did not treat LWE as a law and order problem, the primary responsibility of tackling the Maoist insurgency rests with the respective state. The Union government supplement the state government by providing CAPF to aid their efforts, reimbursing the security-related expenditures under SRE scheme, providing funds for modernization of police force under MPF scheme, issuing guidelines to tackle Maoist problems, and so forth. The strategy adopted by Chhattisgarh for combating Maoist state was clear hold developed. This strategy required the security force to dominate an area to stabilize its security situations. Once security ensured, development activities are taken under the and bring the prosperity to the inhabitants of the area. The strategy essentially involved increasing the security personnel presence in the critical areas and to saturate these areas so that they can carry out operations against the Maoist rebels. For implementing its security response, the state government depend upon the services of CRPF and state police, other civilian groups which are formed from time to time to counter Maoist insurgency. CRPF, since Chhattisgarh did not have to require the police force to tackle Maoist problem, it was a newly inaugurated in 2000. It requested the Union government for assistance. The Union government response and deployed CRPF in 2003. With the mandate to assist the state police during the counter, the Maoist operation, however, the state police could not take up the leadership role. It did not possess essential combat capabilities. Consequently, the CRPF had to unilaterally conduct counter-insurgency operations. Since then, CRPF had been forefront to counter LWE insurgency in Chhattisgarh. In order to effectively deal with the escalating Maoist violence in the country, the Union government decided to raise counter-insurgency commando battalion called as Cobra in CRPF. Now, Cobra is a wing of CRPF. Cobra battalion are a specialized force equipped for commando guerrilla jungle warfare type for short and intelligence based on quick operations. Between 2008 and 11, 10 Cobra battalions were raised and dedicated a school of providing specialized training in jungle warfare. Tactics of Cobra personnels were established. Cobra battalion have been effectively deployed against the Maoist rebel and have conducted several successful counter-Naxal operations since then. However, it is important to note that while CRPF is designated as the premier internal security force of the country, has been deployed in many theaters of the conflict, the force initially lacked the skills to conduct the guerrilla warfare. As the result, when deployed in insurgents prone area like Chhattisgarh, CRPF found it extremely difficult to face the determined and well-trained Maoist rebels. This is evidenced by the fact that even 5 years after the deployment, 80% of CRPF personnel were engaged in passive defense duty, such as protecting Salwa Judum camps, government buildings, offices, and VIPs. On this part, the state police have assigned only 300 of its personnel to fight the Maoist guerrilla. In the way, state police offloaded their responsibility on CRPF, who found themselves in an alien environment with no support from the police, lack of intelligence, non-familiarity with the local terrain, and social fabric on the top. The CRPF itself suffered from many structural operational deficiencies such as irrational and protracted deployment and inadequate training, almost no retraining, poor leadership, strategic and tactical statistics, fatigues, indiscipline, and overwhelming postures of the passive dissent. As the result, CRPF suffered major setbacks during the counter-insurgency operations, a lot of casualties. Some of the examples, like in April 2017, Sukma incident where 26 CRPF Jawans were killed, June to 10, 26 CRPF Jawans were killed. The worst to the April 2010 Dantewara incident, 75 CRPF were massacred by the Maoist. That being said, over the period of time, CRPF started putting its house in order. The force concentrated on improving the training of its personnel, gathering own intelligence, achieving greater coordination with the police in order to emerge effective counter-insurgency force. However, it appears that inadequacies continue to plague the forces and it faces the reverse. Like, for example, 21-22 CRPF Jawans were killed in Maoist in Jagdalpura. Now, what is this Salwa Jugdum and Koya Commandos? Koya Commandos we have already referred previously. Faced with the problems of demoralized police forces who were reluctant to take anti-Maoist operation, the Chhattisgarh government tried to counter the Maoist problems by recruiting local ordinary villagers. Opportunity for such recruitment was provided when villagers from Kuturu village in Bijapur, Tehsil, and Dantewala district protested against the Maoist diktats of ban on collection of tendu leaves and participating in election. This protest movement was called as Salwa Jugdo, arguing that Salwa Jugdum was a manifestation of people's reaction to the atrocities perpetuated by Naxalites. The state government backed Salwa Jugdum activists. The Salwa Jugdum members organized themselves and started taking on Maoist cadres gradually. 2007 villages from 644 villages in Dantewala districts also joined the movement. Since Salwa Judum activists were also easy targets of the retaliatory attacks on the Maoist, they were housed in the temporary relief camps located in the arterial roads. These relief camps, based on the concept of strategic hamleting, isolated the insurgents from the people of some extent. By 2007, 7,238 people were living in 20 Salwa Judum relief camp or base camp. Besides Salwa Judum, the state government also raised vigilante force of SPOs under the Chhattisgarh police regulation. It appointed some of the Judum activities as SPOs on a monthly stipend of 1,500. Many surrendered Maoist as well as persons who were victims of Maoist violence were also recruited as SPOs. The SPOs were trained in handling the weapons provided with the firearms by the police and other CAPF deployed in the state. The SPOs, which numbered at 6,500, were named Koya Commandos, based on the tribes of the region. The Salwa Judum and the Koya Commandos, which were active mainly in Dantewara coastal district, soon attracted the barrage of criticism, especially from the human rights activists, for being high-handed and perpetrating atrocities. The experts committee also observed encouragement of vigilante groups such as Salwa Judum and herding the hapless tribals in making shift camps with the dismal living of condition, remove their habitat deprived of livelihood as a strategy to counter the influence of radical left is not desirable. It delegitimizes politics, dehumanizes people, degenerate those engaged in their security, and above all represents abdiction of the state itself. Disapproving Salvajudum P. Chidambaram in 2008 has also said Center was not in the favor of non-state actors taking the job of law enforcement in their hands. 5 July 11 Supreme Court, while delivering its verdict on writ petition filed against the Salvajudum in May, declared arming of illiterate and semi-literate tribals to counter Maoist by Chhattisgarh government as unconstitutional. It also directed Chhattisgarh government to take immediate cease and desist from using SPOs in manner or form in any activities directly or indirectly aimed at controlling, countering, mitigating, and otherwise eliminating Maoist Naxalite activities in the states of Chhattisgarh. It further directed that the state government to take all appropriate measures to prevent the operations of any group, including not limited to Salvajudum Koya commandos, that in any manner or form seek to take law into private hands, act unconstitutionally, or otherwise violate the human rights of a person. Thus, chastised by Supreme Court, while the state government disbanded the Salvajudum, Chhattisgarh Assembly passed Chhattisgarh Auxiliary Armed Police Act. The act authorizes the state to establish a trained armed force of persons having the knowledge of local area topography and local language dialects, since inaccessible tribal areas in Chhattisgarh are affected by the Maoist violence. In other words, the act regularized existing SPOs and permitted them to be inducted into auxiliary armed force of the state to utter disregard to the Supreme Court order. The state police, an efficient police force with effective combat and intelligence gathering capabilities, has been successfully in responding to the internal security threats of the state level. The success of Greyhounds in Andhra Pradesh and Punjab police in fighting the Maoist Sikh terrorism respectively are such example. In states which continue to see high levels of LWE related to violence, it has been observed that the state police are a weakest link. One of the main reasons of the failure of the police is the fact that the force in general is organized, equipped, and trained for maintaining law and order, crime investigation, and community policing, not for combating insurgency or terrorism. As a result, police personnel deployed to conduct anti-national operations generally displays lack of physical and mental courage, practically know-how, shooting skills, and discipline. In case of Chhattisgarh, the state inherited a depleted police force as well as inadequate infrastructure. On the top of it, police personnel were reluctant to function in a state severely affected by LWE. Given the dire circumstances, the Chhattisgarh government, with the help of Union government, gradually started strengthening its police force. 11th Finance Commission has recommended 984 lakhs would be required for Chhattisgarh to modernize its police force. According to the Union government, release was 664.88 lakhs over the period of 4 years. In addition, the MPF scheme that Chhattisgarh also received around 20 crores in 2001, 21 crores to modernize its police force. These funds helped Chhattisgarh increase its police force from 22,592 personnel in the November to 23,315 in 2005. And 46,425 in 2009. The number of sanctioned police stations rose to 298 to 428 in 2016. At present, Chhattisgarh police station has control of 22 armed battalions, including 9 IRB. Chhattisgarh also created a special task force, STF, draw from the state armed constabulary as well district police. As a specialized force for battling Maoist insurgents, the STF undergo 2-month induction training and are organized into 2 teams comprising of 40 to 50 personnel when they are deployed on the ground. The STF, which was raised in 2007, has approximately 2,700 to 4,000 personnel in April 2021. The task force has its headquarters in Baghera in Durg district with 4 personnel hubs in Kanker, Sukma, Bijapur and Bastar, which will act temporary camps of launching sites for anti-Maoist operations. While the STF have shown success in the operations against the Maoist in the recent time, it faced various handicaps. First, although the force is organized in small teams, ideal for guerrilla warfare, It's deployed in the most affected district. Decisions regarding the deployment patterns, various administration tasks are taken by the headquarters instead of district police superintendent. Experts urge that this centralization of decisions adversely affect the effectiveness of STF because ground level situations are dynamic, which requires quick response and decision. The second handicap that STF faces is the lack of adequate training. Inadequate training is a matter of concerning the entire police force, but it is acute for STF as it is being developed as a special anti-Maoist force. Chhattisgarh is state with a poor police training infrastructure. The police training college, a school located at Chandrakhuri, Mana, Rajanandgaon, Jagdalpur, Borgagaon was established only after the state came into being. Even CTJW, a school in Kanker established in 2004, was in its formative and conceptual stage for a few years before it could properly start training the police and CAPF personnel. The Chhattisgarh government also opened three CIAT schools in Mana, Rajanandgaon, and Jagdalpur in 2010, but their operationalization took time. Interestingly, while Chhattisgarh was steadily increasing its police strength and establishing a new police training school, it did not allocate adequate funds for procuring infrastructure and manpower for these schools. For example, 2004 to 5, the state police expended only 77 lakhs for the training out of the total allocation of 22 crores under the NPF scheme, accounting for 0.3% of the total budget. Likewise, in 2006 and 7, only 25 lakhs were expended on the training out of 76 crores, accounting 0.0328% of the total budget. That training is not accorded priority is evidenced by the fact that substantial part of the budget allocation goes into pay and allowances, weapons, transportation, communication, leaving a very little funds for training purpose. Lack of funds resulted in insufficient manpower and poor infrastructure in training schools. Further, the trainers who were assigned to these schools are disgruntled. They feel that the trainer job is a punishment posting and are constantly looking for a better posting avenues. This is not only because of the mindset but also of the poor living and working conditions in the training school. On the top of this, the incentive for institutional assignments is meagre rupees 15 per month in contrast to 50% of basic pay, which is paid as an additional allowance to STF personnel. Most often than not, the quality of infrastructure is poor because they themselves have not undertaken specialized training courses. The trainers, on the average, display poor instructional abilities, enthusiasm, or motivation to train the recruits. Insufficient infrastructure and resources, as well as lack of the trainers, ensured that these training schools do not have a capacity to train a substantial number of personnel, which is must for raising an effective police force. Paradoxically, these training schools also recruit large personnels than are officially sanctioned. As a result, the duration of the training is cut down, for example, from 9 months to 6 months to accommodate these increased intake. In addition, police personnel are also regularly taken out for their training and assigned laws other duties like during elections, VIP visits. Inadequate as well as poor training of the police personnel is reflected in their lack of physical and mental strength, poor commitment to the job, and professional incompetence, especially in the areas of combat. Presence of such tendencies often induce the police to take an easy approach instead of physically grueling but viable options during combat. They also employ regular and stereotyped duties, administrative tasks devoid of element of surprise and deception. More often than not, large numbers of personnel are involved in counterinsurgency operations to hide operations incompetencies. It is being argued that mass is being used to compensate for the class. Such habits result in operational failures, frequently traps the police personnel in ambushes or IED blasts, resulting in heavy casualties. Another fallout of the lack of proper training is unwillingness of Chhattisgarh police to take the leadership role while confronting the well-trained Maoist cadres, reinforcing the fact Ministry of Home Affairs officially 2021 said Central Force have numbers and the trainings, but they do not no local knowledge or intelligence. Only police can drive out Maoist. The reasons we are not succeeding in Chhattisgarh is because of the local police have not yet taken leadership position, although things were improved over the years. District reserve groups. Realizing the state police personnel continue to show reluctance in taking the Maoist rebels in direct combat, the police leadership decided to raise a force which is populated by the tribal youth familiar with the local terrains, ethos, cultures, and language. According that, DRG was raised over the different period of time, starting 2008 in 7 districts of Bastar spread in the areas of 40,000 square kilometers. It was first step in Kanker, North Bastar and Narayanpur, comprising of Abujamad district in 2008. After the gap of 5 years, the force were raised in Bijapur, Bastar and district in 2013. Subsequently, the force was expanded in Sukuma and Kondagaon district in 2014 and 15. It raised in Dantewada. The DRG is currently of 3,500 personnel strong force. The recruitment to DRG at all level assistant constable, who are most SPOs of the disbanded Salvajudum, former Maoist constable who are recruited formally surrendered Maoist who are recruited as Gopniya Sainik or informers. DRG patrols are provided with the training in the State Police Academy in the jungle warfare training facilities in the Kanke. Some of them are trained by Greyhounds of Andhra Pradesh and also CIJWS in Varente. Being from the local areas, also having the surrendered Maoist amongst the rank, the DRG tracks the Maoist cadre with the help of their local own intelligence channel. The DRG is aware of the movement of the Maoist in the forest, their schedules, habitat, operational patterns, as well as the location of their camps in the different seasons. This information helps them to launching operation deep into the Maoist strongholds with success. While the DRG has been successfully deployed to take on the Maoist rebel, the force has been grappling with the issues such as indiscipline, leadership issues, competitions, and poor coordinations with other forces deployed in the state, all of which adversely affect the fighting capabilities. Many DRG personnel have been dismissed for unruly behaviors and committing crimes. This indiscipline also have negatively affected their training, as most of them do not take rigorous drills seriously. Another issue bedeviling the forces is that while the hunter instinct of tribal youth gave them the courage and grit to take on well-trained PLGA cadres, this aspect, however, proved to be hurdle in making them disciplined fighting force. It is being reported that during the time of combat and crisis, the hunter instinct kicks in and youth reacts according to their instincts, forgetting that they are well-trained specialized forces. Such behavior does not prove deleterious during serious combat with the Maoist, because during such battles only proper training helps in winning and getting out unscathed. Furthermore, the leaders of DRG is provided by non-tribal personals, which more often than not creates a friction between officers and soldiers. Surrender and rehabilitation policy. One of the measures implemented to tackle the Maoist insurgency is surrender and rehabilitation policy. The policy is aimed at weaning away misguided youth and hardcore rebels who have strayed into the path of Maoist movement. Chhattisgarh government announced SNR policy in October 2004. Unfortunately, the police was non-starter and hardly any armed rebel surrendered. For example, between 2005 and 10, only 115 armed cadres surrendered. Faced with the failure to secure a surrender of Maoist, Chhattisgarh government in 15 modified the policy to make it more lucrative, including housing of the surrendered Naxal, compensation for ammunition apart from the weapons they gave up, as well as possibility of all previous cases being removed from the record. This is over and above the benefits such as 5 lakhs for high-ranking Maoists, such as state committees member, 2.5 lakhs for the middle and lower-ranking rebel, a monthly stipend of 6,000 for a maximum period of 36 months. Additional incentive was for recovered weapon, so on and so forth. In fact, the state tried to ensure that the rehabilitation start immediately after the rebel surrenders. He or she is given 10,000 as Protsahan Rashi, encouragement reward. Despite the lucrative package, surrenders figures in Chhattisgarh continues to be dismal. For instance, 1st January 1825 to 21, police records revealed that 1,462 Maoist rebels surrendered. Of these, 1,223 were in the three districts Dantewada, Sukma, Narayanpur. However, 1,462 claims only 130 were sent to the state screening rehabilitation committee, which found only 47 cases eligible for receiving the benefits. This meant that only 3% of so-called Maoist rebels who surrendered were genuine. This fact raises a doubt about the veracity of the police claims that security responses has been successfully concerning The Maoist rebel who are getting increasingly disillusioned by the Maoist ideology and therefore surrendering in large numbers. Human rights activists, especially in Chhattisgarh, has been arguing that the reality of police coerce the poor and innocent villagers to surrender. The police, in its defense, argue that many rebels who have bounties against them do not have their profiles and police record. As a result, it is difficult to verify the antecedents. The police also claims that most of the senior Maoist leaders prefer to surrender in the home state of Andhra Pradesh or Telangana, where the SRR policy is more lucrative. In the view of police surrenders record, the police of Chhattisgarh launched a new scheme, Loan Varatu, Come Back Home, in Gondi dialect. In Dantewada, 26 June 2020, to encourage misguided youth to return to the home, start a new life with the help of government. Police claims the campaign has been successful because within 6 months, 226 rebels, including 61 hardcore leaders, have surrendered. Constitutional provisions. The tribal areas of Chhattisgarh comes under the fifth schedule of the Constitution. Article 244, subclause 1 of the Constitution says that the provisions of the fifth schedule applies to the administration and the control of scheduled areas and scheduled tribes in the state other than the states of Assam, Meghalaya, Tripura, and Mizoram. The declaration of scheduled area is based on the preponderance of the tribal population, compactness, and the reasonable size of the areas, the viable administration entities such as district, block, and taluk, and economic backwardness of the areas compared to the neighboring areas. Chhattisgarh has 14 districts as a complete scheduled areas and 6 districts as a partially scheduled areas. Out of 20,126 villages and 9,977 villages, 49.5% are the part of scheduled areas in the state. The purpose of declaring any area as scheduled area is to preserve the tribal autonomy, their culture, socio-economic empowerment, and ensure social, economic, and political justice and preservation of peace and good governance. For this purpose, the fifth schedule under the paragraph 4 subclause 1 provides the establishment of 20 members at Tribal Advisory Council, with 3/4 being the representative of STs in the State Legislative Assembly. The duty of TAC is to provide advice to the governor on the matter pertaining to the welfare and the advancement of ST of the state. The fifth schedule also vests enormous power to the governor, preparing an annual report regarding the administration of scheduled areas in the state by the governor, appointment of tribes advisory council, regulating the application of laws of the state, and act of parliament to scheduled areas, making regulation for peace and good government of any or all scheduled areas in the state. Under this, governor is empowered to make regulations regarding the prohibition and restrictions of transfer of land from and between scheduled tribes, the allotment of the land to the tribes in scheduled areas, money lending in scheduled areas to the tribals. While constitutional safeguards have been provided for the development of well-being of the tribals, these safeguards have never been properly implemented. For example, annual reports prepared by the governor are crucial as they are the basis of which union government can formulate policies on tribal welfare development as well as give directions to the state government for the administration of the scheduled areas. Therefore, the governor report should contain objective assessment of the quality of governance in the scheduled areas and operationalization of the Act regulation constitutional provisions for the prevention of land alienation, regulation of money lending, protecting of their interest of the tribals, abolition of bonded labor, prescription of a special excise policy keeping in the view of tribal customs. However, it is being observed that the report prepared by the successive Chhattisgarh government often read like modified versions of the annual report of the Department of Tribal Affairs. In earlier reports, there was no mention of the issues such as law and order situation, Maoist problem, the political unrest in the scheduled areas, and only matters related to the development were covered. It is only the later report that the law and order situation as well as Maoist problem find mention in the government reports. Moreover, mandatory inter-ministerial consultations on the government reports were not conducted. In fact, there are allegations that the governor does not exercise her extra constitutional power in administering the tribal areas, lest it bring in conflict with the state government. Allegation also made that the governor did not listen to the complaints of the tribal regarding the forceful land grab. As a regard, TAC Chhattisgarh has set up TAC soon after its inception as the state in 2000. The TAC comprises of Chief Minister, Chairman, Minister of Scheduled Tribes and Scheduled Caste Development Department as a Vice Chairman, 15 scheduled tribe members in Legislative Assembly as members, 3 members of Parliament nominated as members, Secretary, Scheduled Tribes and Scheduled Caste Development Department, Chhattisgarh Government as Secretary. It is evident that TAC comprises mainly of state officials and few nominated as independent persons with little knowledge about tribal affairs. Although TAC was envisioned as a body to provide information, suggestion, and advice on the matters of concern for the tribal advancement, the manner in which it is constituted of its effectiveness. The reasons being, firstly, the TAC is only discussed and recommended on the matters referred to it by the government. The Chhattisgarh TAC rules states that apart from the matters referred to, there shall be no issue shall be taken up for the discussion, including in the proceedings. No proposal shall be passed in the meeting unless the issue has been mentioned in the notice for the meeting. However, the chairperson can use his discretion, permit such issues to be taken up for the proceedings that he thinks necessary and are in direction of the motto of the council at large, but not excluded in notice. Second, TAC does not have any powers to implement its own recommendation. Third, since the members of TAC are appointed by the state and or the governor, and not through election, TAC is not answerable to the tribal population whom it represents. For those betterment, it is supposed to be working. Furthermore, it is being observed that the meetings of the TAC is more often than not perfunctory related issues such as land alienation of tribal and are seldom, rarely discussed. Besides fifth schedule, prohibition of provisions of panchayats extension in the scheduled areas PESA 1996 has been implemented in Chhattisgarh. PESA recognizes the right of tribal communities to govern themselves according to their own systems of self-government, also acknowledge their traditional rights over natural resources. PESA also enjoins that the state legislation shall be in consonance with the customary social and religious practices and the tribal management practices of the common resources. For achieving this objective, the Chhattisgarh Panchayat Adhiniyam empowers Gram Sabhas, village assemblies, to approve the plan of socio-economical development controlling of sector, including the process and personnel who implement the policies, exercising control over forest resources, minor water bodies, minor minerals, managing local markets, preventing land alienation, restoring alienated lands, regulating intoxicants, amongst the things. Like in other states, Gram Sabha in Chhattisgarh has power to ensure accountability of Gram Panchayats to them, indulging in the power to recall Sarpanch or Panch subject to certain conditions. Gram Panchayats are assigned with several civic, regulatory, and welfare and maintenance functions, including financial functions to collect various types of taxes. Funds for 12 departments have been devolved to Panchayats. Panchayats also appoint official of 9 departments. Chhattisgarh Panchayat at the village block district out of total 11,664 Gram Panchayats in Chhattisgarh, 5,632 Gram Panchayat comprising 48.28% of scheduled areas. The fact that Peshwa has not been implemented effectively can be ascertained from the fact that Chhattisgarh has not formulated the rules of the Act yet. In fact, it is being argued that the Act has become toothless as its spirit has been violated by the state because of the Gram Sabha has no power, as their power can be overridden. Moreover, many tribal living in the fifth scheduled areas do not figure in the voter list and therefore cannot be member of Gram Sabha. Coming to the governance, the reason decree for the formation of Chhattisgarh was social and economic underdevelopment of undivided Madhya Pradesh. Reason of existence. It was envisaged that the formation of new state would bring about a desired level of development which would help to fight left-wing extremism plagued the region. The report of the experts group of planning commission on the development challenge in the extremist affected area, the area of central India where unrest is prevailing covers several states, Andhra Pradesh, Odisha, Chhattisgarh, Madhya Pradesh, Jharkhand and part of Maharashtra also, and are minimally administered. The state intervention both for the development and for law and order have been fairly low. In fact, there is a kind of vacuum of administration in these areas which is being exploited by the armed movements, giving more illusory protections and justice to the local population. The creation of Chhattisgarh to mitigate the problem sense of administration ironically faced a peculiar problem. The officials who were posted in the newly created states were unwilling to reside in what was seen by them as remote and banishment from a comfortable and well-grounded Bhopal. The new cadres of IAS for the state lacked enough officials for appropriate seniority at will. This meant that officials were greater experience and knowledge about the matters administration was not available to the new state. Paradoxically, Chhattisgarh government desire to bring in economic development in the state had in fact resulted in the absence of administration because it pulled out whatever state machinery was functioning for predominantly resources-rich tribal areas to make a way to the private investors. This policy of the government not only created a vacuum of governance but also took away the primary means of the livelihood of the tribals, that is, the land. Absence of the governance at the grassroots means that the people inhabited these areas are deprived of basic amenities and provisions such as healthcare, education, sanitation, means of livelihood, and so forth and so forth. Not surprising, 2011 Human Development Index ranked Chhattisgarh the lowest amongst the state with HDI to 0 to 0.35 indicated unequal access and high exclusion. In 2017, the Center of Policy Research conducted a comprehensive analysis implementation of four union government-sponsored social sector scheme SSA Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan for elementary education of child of 6 to 11, midday meal Rashtriya Madhyamik Shiksha Abhiyan for secondary education, integrated child development schemes in four districts of Chhattisgarh, Rajnandgaon, Surajpur, Jangir, Champa, and Bastar. In the detailed report, CPR concluded that the four schemes suffer from limited human resources and weak internal management, resulting in the poor supervision, insufficient planning capacity, and lack of prioritized resource allocation at the grassroots, delayed fund flow, and complicated disbursement process. According to the report, Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan and Rashtriya Madhyamik Shiksha Abhiyan suffered from teacher shortage, absenteeism, multi-grade teaching, a single teacher teaching several grades. These factors have adversely affected the quality of education, and the state governments also found it difficult to recruit teachers for secondary school. Those who were recruited never reported for work. Moreover, the salaries of decentralized teachers, Shiksha Karmis, Panchayat Shikshaks, were often delayed, thus robbing them from any motivation to teach. According to the annual status of education report, Chhattisgarh has witnessed a decline in the government school enrollment as the enrollment in the private school are increasing steadily. The multidimensional property of 2021 also indicates unbalanced development in the districts such as Sukma, Dantewara, Bijapur, Bastar, and Narayanpur are having around 45 and 50% of the population who are multidimensionally poor. This means that these districts, which are also hotbed of LWE, continue to suffer from acute deprivation in accessing education, nutritional status, basic services like water, sanitation, energy, and asset ownership. That state that Chhattisgarh government over the years have worked towards the improving people living of standards. Several studies has also corroborated the fact that state performance in relatively improving the literacy rate, assessing the health and sanitation provided literacy rates, access to the health sanitation, providing basic amenities such as road, electricity has been noteworthy. In fact, report of the Public Affairs Centers, a Bangalore-based non-profit think tank, put Chhattisgarh as the fourth best governed states of India and third in sustainability index. However, as indicated earlier, governance in the state is uneven. The LW hits the district still continues to suffer from the absence of lack governance. Summary. Chhattisgarh was chosen by the communist leadership precisely because of its hilly and heavily forested terrains established their base areas. Pervasive underdevelopment exploitations of the tribe people by the outsider provided them with the issue around which they could mobilize people and instigate them fight against the area. The limited presence and the total absence administration in the tribal area meant that the inhabitants of these remote areas are deprived not only of basic amenities infrastructure but also from the grievance redressal. All these factors alienated the people from the government as well as gravitated towards the Maoist. The state tried to suppress the Maoist threat through its coercive power, but the lack of capabilities, courage of its police forces to fight the Maoist made it dependent heavily on the CRPF. Unfortunately, CRPF does not possess the proper knowledge of the terrains and seldom got any intelligence about the rebels of the police. As the result, they found it difficult to combat the Maoist movements for the long time. The state government efforts to wean the youth, especially the tribe youths, from the Maoist folds were generous surrenders and rehabilitation scheme as well. The positions in police force also failed. Further, poor implementation of the constitution safeguard under fifth schedule and visa provided to the tribal further alienated them. They have not been effective in bringing meaningful transformation in the lives of tribal. Last but not least, Chhattisgarh for the long time performed poorly in the domain of governance. It is only last 5 years that the state government has made some attempts to extend its administrative reach in the far-flung areas. However, the developmental activities undertaken by the state government are uneven in the spread and reach, where the most affected districts continue to suffer from the lack of basic infrastructure. This is Chhattisgarh. Tomorrow, next day, we'll be having Manipur. Question of the day. Activities happening in one state affects adjoining states as well. Kindly discuss some government acts of a state which affected the adjoining states. Write out this question. Activities happening in one state affects the adjoining states as well. Kindly discuss some government acts of a state which affected the adjoining states. And send it 9324504318. It will be reviewed and sent back. Next session, Money Boy.